The stock of Unitech has ironically moved up today. That's the story for you. Up about 13.5% after the story broke. All right, let's get a legal discussion going on this. Sandeep Bhagat, partner at SNR, joins us. Also joining us is Sandeep Parekh. He will join us on the phone line in a bit. But Sandeep, first let me ask you, thank you for joining in first. Yeah. The legality of this move. Now the MCA has moved, NCLT 8 has disbanded the board, appointed nominee directors. I mean, the comparison with Satyam is but natural. Yeah. But in the case of Satyam, there was actually an admission of a wrongdoing. Yeah. Is the government putting the cart before the horse in this one?
So it's, I mean, a fairly drastic step for the government to take. Probably on the back of all the Supreme Court orders and the fact that the promoters are in jail may have started this. I think Satyam is one case there. It was a fraud, it had come out, it had been admitted. I think maybe instead of Satyam, maybe the company to look at would be Matus, which wasn't actually directly where the promoter was, but it was building residential properties. And yet there also the government did take over the company. So I think that would be probably a more appropriate comparison to what's going on here. Does the government have the power? Yes, it does have the power. The government has to be of the opinion that the affairs of the company are being conducted in a manner which is prejudicial to public interest. It doesn't talk about being prejudicial to the shareholders, it talks about a general, to public interest. The one question would be, and we are still, not sure of the facts, what is the basis of the government to form this opinion? There is a separate section in the Companies Act which says that the government can actually start investigations into the affairs of a company if it's in public interest, which is section 210. That's not what has happened here, or it doesn't appear to have happened here, and it need not. The government can be of the opinion and it has to come up. So I think one of the important things would be what is the basis on which this decision was made by the government to invoke its power. It is a fairly serious step to take in these matters. So
it would need to prove, the government would need to prove diversion of funds, right? But the NCLT seems to have disbanded the board already. Yeah,
so I think the government, and it's really a question of whether the government is presenting the petition, is the NCLT convinced based on what is presented? Is it, at that point acceptable to make the change based on what the government is saying? NCLT does have the power to make an immediate move to change it. And the current board and the promoters have, could challenge it and may challenge it tomorrow. But I think that's just a process. The NCLT, prima facie, on the face of what this thing is, needs to be satisfied. Okay. It's in the opinion of the judge at that point. And if he is, then, that's the process which is laid out.
Two quick points. One is our report also points out that they have restrained members of the management and the directors from mortgaging or selling their own property from moving on. Second is that there is already, as you mentioned, the court case that's going on in the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court is looking at selling some of these assets. Do you see any conflict here?
So no, I think the first aspect may be relating to allegations of diversion of funds, for example, that funds have been diverted by directors, and therefore those funds are being used to, in turn, buy properties, or those are being sold. So they're trying to probably do a check and balance. I think at a particular stage when the government moves a petition like this, in addition to replacing the board, certain other steps are taken by the court. They do direct, and this may be one of the directions the government has sought, that please don't permit them to sell their stakes. I think the fact that there are two parallel proceedings going on, the Supreme Court could well take its own view on this, and those parallel proceedings could start and continue with the NCLT. I don't see the two of them being in conflict. At some point they'll have to merge, but right now the government can, maybe it's setting an example, maybe it's doing something, this is a drastic action. Let's just, say that.
So when if and when the promoters go and challenge this, what would they need to prove to be able to, sort of hold on? They would need to prove that funds were not diverted, because if it's a public interest issue, then, how do you challenge that? Yeah, no, so I think, look, the first thing is it really public interest? Is it a contractual dispute? Why does it involve, is the fact that home buyers
because the way the public good is, it's in the interest of society as a whole, not a particular class. So maybe the challenge could be that why is it that home buyers and the ones who've been affected, why are they the ones, why is a select class being singled out to take over a company? So there would be challenges. The court doesn't have jurisdiction. This is not a matter which is appropriate for this particular relief. Those would be the kind of reliefs a promoter would be seeking. So they would seek to challenge it, I would think. I mean, let's see how it goes. It is interesting case law to follow, I think.
I one last question. Interestingly, we've seen the stock move up today, up about 13% on the Unitech stock. But there is the stockholder of Unitech too, who's pretty much been rammed over the last 6-8 months, ever since this broke right from April this year. The promoter of the company is in jail. Clearly, the prospects financially doesn't look good at all. I mean, this move clearly is going to make the stock move worse. Where does he seek recourse?
The promoter or the shareholder?
Anyone who's a shareholder.
No, so I think the way the section works is that while the shareholders are to be taken into account, and that's what section 242 says, but you don't have to always consider only the shareholders' interests when you're taking actions again in this particular case. You have to consider what they call public interest, which is not just limited to shareholders. So I think the shareholder, stock is moving up, maybe people feel there will be movement. There may be, asset sales. Maybe somebody new will come and take over and complete these residential projects. So maybe the market is actually signaling, something different than what the promoters want, and that would be interesting to see what happens, I think.
So to the point that you were making earlier, so there has not been, we haven't been presented with proof of, say, financial diversions by the government, etc. So the question could be raised as to why these guys and why not somebody else? Because, there are a whole bunch of developers out there who haven't delivered on time, right? That would be a relevant debate as well?
That would be relevant. I'm sure that would be an argument made by the promoters that why are you singling us out? And as I said, because there are Supreme Court proceedings, promoters are in jail, there are a little bit more additional facts here than with any other, developer. But I think you're right. That is something which, is something which people would look at, argue, and say, why us?
Would the JP home buyers case be relevant at all? Because there also the Supreme Court has taken a fairly strong stance in terms of protecting home buyers. But they're completely different cases, so I don't know if
they are different. But I think I'm sure the promoters there would also be looking at this carefully. I think it is sending out a lesson. It is sending out a message, and I think people are looking at it and saying, okay, or will look at it and say, taking over your company, replacing your directors, having a third party come in, and then what they can do, which they have pretty much wide powers to do anything, I think is something every promoter, every company would look at.
Sandeep Bhagat, thank you so much indeed for joining us with your views. That's a view coming in from Sandeep Bhagat. We also have Sandeep Parekh, who's just joined in. Sandeep, thank you for joining in. Sorry, we got you a little late. We were discussing the ramifications of this case. Your comments on what you've thought of the move by the government to take over the board of the company, while Sandeep Bhagat, who believes that this is well within the law, what's your take?
Yes, I think the facts were quite gross in terms of what they've been doing over the years in terms of default to customers, investors, all kinds of misstatements were made. So I think it was a company which required some deep cleansing. And I guess this is because of, I think the final push was probably because of the customers who bought the flats and were not given delivery, or I think I believe certain flats were sold multiple times as well. So I think there's a lot of things which caused this, but I think I think it's a good move, and it's certainly well within the law.
Mr. Parekh, can you talk us a little bit through, the minority shareholders aspect of this? We were just, sort of pointing out that the stock is trading higher, perhaps because they expect some resolution or, expect that the company will go into stronger hands. But the interest of the minority shareholders in all of this, because the government is going through without actually having proof or at least proven to the outside world that there is, diversion of funds or whatever they are alleging.
Yes. As of now, I think they've only taken over the board, right? So what they do with this company is to be seen. But my guess was, like Satyam, they'll also try to either sell the company or kind of reconstitute the board and try to salvage the company through private hands. Really, I don't think the government is in the business of turning around companies. So my guess is going to be that they'll find some good private sector people and hand over the company to those people, or just sell the, at least maybe seize the shares of the promoters and sell them to some new control person.
Okay, Sandeep, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, indeed, for joining us. Sandeep Parekh giving us another view as well on the legal ramifications of this. So the story as it stands is that the NCLT or the MCA has moved the National Company Law Tribunal to take over management control and also remove the board members. About 10 board members are going to be instituted. The stock, interestingly, after that story broke, is up today, but the fortunes of Unitech is very well known. That's the story for you.